Good morning. I'm thrilled to be coming to you this morning. And this is a piece that I've been thinking about with all the coronavirus going on and all the different posts you see, different news outlets and media sources and information. Is one of the interesting pieces that I've observed is that anyone who is taking this more seriously or more strict than us, we consider paranoid. And anyone who's being less restrictive or less cautious or less healthcare oriented than us is being irresponsible. And the reality is that you and only you are handling this situation perfectly. Now, certainly I say that with a little bit of jest, but if you watch and observe the way we conduct ourselves, the way we talk to others, is very easy for us to act exactly like that. That we are the only ones that are handling this situation exactly right. That anyone who's being more cautious than us is paranoid. Anyone who's being less cautious is irresponsible. And one of the concerns that I have about this is that the potential exists to divide families and marriages and churches. And that we could look at this, and however others are handling it, we're so quick to judge. Even though if we're honest, we probably don't have 100% of the facts ourselves. Now, what I'm saying about this is I'm not saying that you shouldn't try to study it. I'm not saying you shouldn't have an opinion. I'm not saying you shouldn't exercise caution. No, in fact, you should do those things. But I think it's when we look towards others and look at others that we should say, there should be a little bit of humility and a little bit of grace. Now, we could all look at the extremes and say, okay, at the extremes, I think we could probably all agree that if you're out there licking toilet bowls, say, I think everyone almost could say, that's irresponsible. Or if you're so concerned about germs that you're taking a flamethrower to everyone you meet, you're going to say, well, that's a bit paranoid. But within a certain range, it's easy for us to look at others and judge, not knowing where they're coming from, how hard they've wrestled with it, and if their situation exactly matches ours. This reminded me of a passage as I was thinking through this in the scripture that I'm sure maybe some of us have read before, but it's a passage that talks about this issue. And in Romans chapter 14, it says, in verse 2, it says, one person believes he may eat anything, while the weak person eats only vegetables. He says, let no one who eats despise the one who abstains, and let not the one who abstains pass judgment on the one who eats, for God welcomed him. Now, in this early church context, you had two groups there. One group was eating meat, and they're enjoying that. And they look on the group that refuses to eat meat, and they say, you guys are crazy. You guys are missing out. You don't know what you're doing. And the group that's eating meat, doesn't eat meat, looks on the group that's eating meat and judges them, saying, don't you know where the meat's been? Don't you know that this used to violate the Jewish laws? It says, who are you to pass judgment on the servant of another? It is before his own master that he stands or falls, and he will be upheld, for the Lord is able to make him stand. Paul asks this rhetorical question here. He says, who are you to judge your brother? Who are you to judge your brother? He says, one person esteems one day as better than another. This is a second issue that we're going to be looking at. He says, while others esteem all days alike, each one should be fully convinced in his own mind. Paul's going to talk a second issue. The first issue is eating meat. Second issue is, are there certain days that are more sacred than others? And his solution is, he says, everyone should be convinced in his own mind. The one who observes the day, observe it in honor of the Lord. The one who eats, eat in honor of the Lord, since he gives thanks to God, while the other one abstains in honor of the Lord and gives thanks to God. For none of us lives to himself, and none of us dies to himself. If we live to the Lord. If we die to the Lord. So then, whether we live or whether we die, we are the Lord's. For to this end Christ died, and he lived again, that he might be Lord of both the dead and of the living. So why do you pass judgment on your brother? Or why do you despise your brother? For we will all stand before the judgment seat of Christ, for it is written, As I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, every tongue shall confess to God. So that each of us will give an account of himself to God. Now, this passage does not specifically talk about the coronavirus and how to handle it. But I think it's so instructive and helpful in looking at this. Because the danger exists that we, in the midst of all this, can destroy relationships and hurt others permanently with a virus that will have a longer than we like lifespan, but still a definite lifespan. And he says here, first of all, he says, each should be convinced in his own mind, verse 5, that it is not wrong for you to look at the facts, to assimilate them the best you can, to look at your own life circumstance and situation, and come to a conclusion. In fact, it would be irresponsible to not do that. That you need to look at it and say, what is the best decision I can make with the information that I have? That is 100% okay. Be convinced in your own mind how you should handle this. But what's not okay is if then we take that decision that was personal, that was for us with our situation, and we look at everybody else who looks at it even a little bit differently and put judgment on them for handling it differently. That anyone is more cautious, that we look at them and say, you are so irresponsible. You just are so ignorant. Haven't you been watching the news? Haven't you been paying attention to anything that's been said? Or if we see someone who's being a little bit more restrictive, and we say, I can't believe. You're just so paranoid. The reality is there's a lot of concerns that we all have right now. And we're trying to juggle them all. First and foremost is the health concern. But then we have economic concerns. We have mental health concerns. There's concerns that our social workers and many of us have for kids trapped in homes that are abusive. That the abuse will escalate during this time. There's long-term effects that we're concerned about. Even there's freedom and religious liberty concerns. And how we take all these concerns and how we balance all these concerns, probably the exact way that you balance them, is probably not going to be done by everyone else. And that's okay. As long as you are doing it to the glory of God. Verse 7 says, none of us lives to ourselves and none of us dies to ourselves. I would encourage you, when you're making these concerns, when you're kind of formulating your own opinion, make sure that you aren't the only one you're thinking of. That you're thinking of others around you. Their health, their safety, their mental health, their spiritual health. And that you're trying to consider those pieces as you make your decisions. As you come to a conclusion for yourself. Because we're not just living to ourselves and dying to ourselves. But it's good to note that ultimately the way we decide things, God is the only one that we're going to be accountable to. That we need to make these decisions in a way that we're accountable to God. In our families, in our churches, in our marriages, in our friendships, you will doubtless have people who view this situation differently. They handle it differently. They handle it in ways that you may not handle it. They handle it in ways that concern you. But instead of quickly judging, quickly accusing, quickly despising them for being paranoid, I encourage you to take the opportunity to try to understand. Try to understand the concerns that they are having. Try to understand how they're viewing the pieces. And at the end of the day, you may not 100% agree. And that's okay. You may see it just a little bit differently, and there's nothing wrong with that. But don't let this time fracture the relationships you have. Don't let it destroy your family relationships. Don't let it destroy the unity of the church. As there's talk even towards reopening, some people think it's already too slow. Some people are going to say this is way too fast that we're reopening. And there's aspects of both that may be true. The reality is we're probably not going to know for a couple of years if we did exactly the right thing. But as we're kind of stumbling along this together, make your decisions to honor God. Make your decisions out of love for more than just yourself. Make your decisions out of love for God, love for others. And then as you look at others who are handling things differently, I would encourage you, don't believe the lie that you're the only one that's trying to calculate for all the facts, that's trying to accommodate all facts. In fact, extend a little grace, extend a little humility, extend a little love, and know that as we get through this, the relationships that we had before and have made during are the things that are going to matter the most as we come out the other side. Treat those with love, treat those with respect. Don't judge others, don't despise others. Encourage, listen, love, and laugh. I love you all. God bless.